React or respond, we all get to choose. When I first contemplated what this new post would be about, I thought I had it all figured out. Something unexpected had happened that stirred emotions within me, and I thought I would write about that. But before I had time to sit down to write, something else had happened. But something else didn't happen just once. It happened at least 6 times prior to me actually getting the chance to get my thoughts together enough to begin writing. When you have finished reading this post, I truly hope you will have been able to take away even a smidgen of the valuable life lessons that I was able to embrace by having had the following experiences. So, here we go. Between the 1st of February and the 24th of March, I would say that I had a lot pulling at my emotions outside the daily stuff one might normally expect to have to deal with. February 1st, March 4th, and March 24th are the death anniversaries of my parents and a close friend and colleague of mine. And my mother would have celebrated her birthday on March 18th had she still been here. On February 19th, I was unable to save the life of an eastern bluebird I'd rescued. On March 13th, two dueling robins flew right into my windshield as I was driving to work, killing them instantly. And on March 15th, I came upon a squirrel that had just been hit by a car and killed. On March 21st, I had an interaction with a colleague of mine, which managed to leave me reflecting on some negative experiences from my childhood. Following the interaction with this colleague and a particular comment she had made to me, I found myself in need of deciding what I would allow our relationship to look like moving forward. Would I distance myself from her or simply consider the source and let the statement pass? With a little time and consideration, I decided to let the statement go. Be the bigger person, so to speak. Choose to rise above it. On April 13th, while installing the railing on the new deck I was having built, the builder had affixed the railing directly to my home, bolting it right through the siding on the house without my permission. When I walked outside and saw this, I was both shocked and angry. Never in my life would I have agreed to having this deck railing bolted to my home in the manner that he had done. I absolutely would not have approved of that decision. I found myself caught in intense emotions that I had to deal with quickly. I calmly expressed to the builder that I was not pleased. I had realized that what I was displeased with had already been done, and there was no undoing it. I realized that I could choose to allow my anger to fester and boil over, or I could choose to accept what was in the moment. Continuing to be upset, ranting, and carrying on about it was not going to make it any better, and I certainly would not feel better by choosing to continue being angry. So I chose to accept what was. I made a couple of jokes with the man, provided him with a cool drink, and then I went back inside my home to get some work done. Later, I went back outside to check on the man's progress. By this point, he had built the gate and had begun attaching it to the fence. That was when I noticed one of the boards he had used for the gate frame. This board was all chewed up. I pointed it out and told the man that this was unacceptable and that it needed to be replaced. He indicated that the pickets would cover up a lot of the damaged board. That is when I calmly asked him the following, quote, if you had hired someone to build a deck for you and you paid them a decent amount of money to do that job, would this be acceptable to you? End quote. His response was, quote, no, but I don't have any more boards, end quote. I told him he needed to go get another board and to replace the one we had been discussing, which he did. I also thanked him for being honest with me in his answer to my question. The next day, April 14th, I would spend a good hour speaking with a young man who came to clean up a small mess that had been left behind by the deck builder the day before. We would find ourselves talking about deeply spiritual concepts, racial issues, doing time in prison, police abuse of Black folks. He is Black, and I am a retired law enforcement officer, and other multifaceted concepts that I had no way of imagining were on my agenda for that day. Both the young man and I admitted to each other that we had gotten a lot out of our conversation and were grateful for it. On April 16th, I was struck by the selfishness of people who feel the need to take up two parking spaces when they park in public parking lots, as well as people who, for whatever reason, seem unable to drive above 40 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour speed zone, for miles on end. I felt myself getting frustrated by this and contemplating trying to pass the vehicles in front of me. However, as soon as that thought came to me, I realized that I was on a dangerous stretch of road, and trying to pass the slower vehicles could have put me at risk of an accident. I also took a moment to take a few deep breaths and remind myself that there was nowhere that I needed to be anytime soon, so it was okay for me to just slow down a bit myself, relax. And so I did. Finally, while sitting in my office at work yesterday, the colleague who I had that earlier negative interaction with had stopped by. She stepped just inside my office doorway and stood there for a moment. Our site supervisor was in my office at the time when my colleague said to me that she didn't know that I had come into the office. My response was, quote, "I didn't know that I had to check in with you," end quote. I was smiling when I said this, and both me and our supervisor laughed as I was joking with my colleague. However, my colleague appeared to be hurt by what I had said as she began to walk away. I let her know that I was just kidding her. I let her know that that was just me teasing her. I directed her attention to my warning sign posted in my office, which reads, quote, "Warning, I like to play, I like to kid, I like to joke, I like to have fun. And when you start to feel better, you will probably like these things again too. And that will be awesome." End quote. I also told her that she didn't have to leave, and I expressed to her that I had intended to say hello to her as I always do when I get to the office, but her office door was closed when I got to work, so I assumed she was with a client. As my colleague stepped back into my office, I could tell something was wrong with her, so I asked her if she needed a hug. Her response was, quote, "Maybe," end quote. I got out of my seat and asked her again, and she had tears in her eyes as she apologized to me and our supervisor for being emotional. I gave my colleague a big hug, and she began to cry audibly for a moment. I had a client waiting on me at that time, so I was not able to continue talking with her then, but I did offer to talk with her later if she would like. She came back to my office later to tell me she was leaving. I asked her if she wanted to talk then, and she declined, stating that she would cry. I chose not to ask her again or encourage her to talk anyway, as in that moment she was choosing not to let herself cry. While crying can be healthy, being able to manage the place and time that you open yourself up to crying can be healthy too. It's a balancing act that takes a lifetime to learn how to manage, if even then. The takeaways. Life is full of surprises. We all have our own stuff at any given time that can feel consuming or overwhelming if we let it. But we really do get to choose. In almost all situations throughout our lives, we really do get to choose whether we will react or respond and what that will look like. Granted, it does take work, but it is doable. So, what about you? When life sneaks up on and surprises you with something that in an instant feels overwhelming, what will you do? Will you react out of emotion, or will you respond thoughtfully and logically with tactfulness. I do hope you will remember that you get to choose. Always, TJ.